In the first verse, sacred space for God. When you divide up the inheritance of the land, you must set aside part of the land as sacred space for God. Approximately 7 miles long by 6 miles wide, all of its holy ground. Within this rectangle, reserve a 750-foot square for the sanctuary with a 75-foot buffer zone surrounding it. Mark off with the sacred reserve a section 7 miles long by 3 miles wide. The sanctuary with its Holy of Holies will be placed there. This is where the priests will live, those who lead worship in the sanctuary and serve God there. Their houses will be there along with the holy place. To the north of the sacred reserve, an area roughly 7 miles long and 2¼ miles wide will be set aside as land for the villages of the Levites, who administer the affairs of worship in the sanctuary. To the south of the sacred reserve, measure off a section 7 miles long and about 1.5 miles wide for the city itself, an area held in common by the whole family of Israel. The prince gets the land abutting the 7-mile east and west borders of the central sacred square, extending eastward toward the Jordan and westward toward the Mediterranean. This is the prince's possession in Israel. My princes will no longer bully my people, running roughshod over them that respect the land as it's been allotted to the tribes. This is the message of God, the Master. I put up with you long enough, princes of Israel. Quit bullying and taking advantage of my people. Do what's just and right for a change. Use honest scales, honest weights, and honest measures. Every pound must have 16 ounces. Every gallon must measure 4 quarts. The ounce is the basic measure for both, and your coins must be honest. No wooden nickels. Everyone in the land must contribute. These are the prescribed offerings you are to supply: 1/60th part of your wheat, 1/60th part of your barley, 100th part of your oil, 1 sheep out of every 200 from the lush pastures of Israel. These will be used for the grain offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings for making the atonement sacrifices for the people. Decree of God the Master. Everyone in the land must contribute to these special offerings that the prince in Israel will administer. It's the prince's job to provide the burnt offerings, grain offerings, and drink offerings at the holy festivals, the new moons and the Sabbaths, all the commanded feasts among the people of Israel, sin offerings, grain offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings for making atonement for the people of Israel are his responsibility. This is the message from God the Master. On the first day of the first month, take an unblemished bull, calf, and purify the sanctuary. The priest is to take blood from the sin offerings and rub it on the doorposts of the temple, on the 4 corners of the ledge of the altar, and on the gate entrance to the inside courtyard. Repeat this ritual on the 7th day of the month for anyone who sins without knowing it. In this way, you make atonement for the temple. On the 14th day of the first month, you will observe the Passover, a feast of 7 days. During the feast, you will eat bread and made without yeast. On Passover, the prince supplies a bull as a sin offering for himself and all the people of the country. Each day for each of the 7 days of the feast, he will supply 7 bulls and 7 rams, unblemished, as a burnt offering to God, and also each day a male goat. He will supply about 5½ gallons of grain offerings and a gallon of oil for each bull and each ram. On the 15th day of the 7th month, and on each of the 7 days of the feast, he is to supply the same materials for sin offerings, burnt offerings, grain offerings, and oil. Ezekiel 46. Message from God the Master. The gate of the inside courtyard on the east is to be shut on the 6 working days, but open on the Sabbath. It is also to be open on the new moon. The prince will enter through the entrance area of the gate complex and stand at the gate post as the priest present his burnt offerings and peace offerings while he worships there on the porch. He will then leave, but the gate won't be shut until evening. On the Sabbaths and new moons, the people are to worship before God at the outside entrance of that gate complex. The prince supplies for God the burnt offerings for the Sabbath: 6 unblemished lambs and an unblemished ram. The grain offering to go with the ram is about 5½ gallons plus a gallon of oil and a handful of grain for each lamb. At the new moon, he is to supply a bull calf, 6 lambs, and a ram, also without blemish. He will also supply 5½ gallons of grain offering and a gallon of oil for both ram and bull, and a handful of grain offering for each lamb. When the prince enters, he will go through the entrance vestibule of the gate complex and leave the same way. But when the people of the land come to worship God at the commanded feast, those who enter through the north gate will exit from the south gate, and those who enter from the south gate will exit from the north gate. You don't exit the gate through which you enter, but through the opposite gate. The prince is to be there, mingling with them, going in and out with them. At the festivals and the commanded feast, the appropriate grain offerings is 5½ gallons with a gallon of oil for the bull, and a ram and a handful of grain for each lamb. When the prince brings a free will offering to God, whether a burnt offering or peace offering, the east gate is to be open for him. He offers his burnt or peace offering the same as he does on the Sabbath. Then he leaves, and after he is out, the gate is shut. Every morning you are to bring a yearling lamb unblemished for a burnt offering to God. Also every morning bring a grain offering for about a gallon of grain with a quart or so of oil to moisten it. Presenting this grain offering to God is standard procedure. The lamb, the grain offering, and the oil for the burnt offering are a regular daily ritual. A message from God the Master. If the prince deeds a gift from his inheritance to one of his sons, it stays in the family. But if he deeds a gift from his inheritance to a servant, the servant keeps it only until the year of liberation, the Jubilee year. After that, it comes back to the prince. His inheritance is only for his sons. It stays in the family. The prince must not take the inheritance from any of the people, dispossessing them of their land. He can give his sons only what he owns himself. None of my people are to be run off their land. Then the man brought me from the north gate into the holy chambers assigned to the priests and showed me a back room to the west. He said, "This is the kitchen where the priests will cook the guilt offering and the sin offering and bake the grain offering so that they won't have to do it in the outside courtyard and endanger the unprepared people out there with the holy." He proceeded to take me to the outside courtyard and around to each of its four corners. In each corner, I observed another court. In each of the four corners of the outside courtyard were smaller courts, 60 by 45 feet, each the same size. On the inside walls of the courts was a stone shelf, and beneath the shelves, hearths for cooking. He said, "These are the kitchens where those who serve in the temple will cook the sacrifices of the people." Ezekiel 47, trees on both sides of the river. Now he brought me to the entrance of the temple. I saw water pouring out from under the temple porch to the east, and the temple faced east. The water poured from the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then took me out through the north gate, led me through the outside to the gate complex on the east. The water was gushing from under the south from the front of the temple. He walked to the east with a measuring tape and measured off 1,500 feet, leading me through water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,500 feet, leading me through water that was knee deep. He measured me off another 1,500 feet, leading me through water waist deep. Water came up around my waist. He measured off another 1,500 feet. By now, the river over my head, water to swim in, water no one could possibly walk through. He said, "Son of man, have you had a good look?" Then he took me back to the riverbank. While sitting on the bank, I noticed a lot of trees on both sides of the river. He told me, "This water flows east, descends to the Araba, and then into the sea of stagnant waters. When it empties into those waters, the sea will become fresh. Wherever the river flows, life will flourish. Great schools of fish, because the river is turning the salt sea into fresh water. Where the river flows, life abounds. Fishermen will stand shoulder to shoulder along the shore from En-Gedi all the way north to En-Eglaim, casting their nets. The sea will teem with fish of all kinds, like the fish of the great Mediterranean. The swamps and marshes won't become fresh, they'll stay salty. But the river itself on both banks will grow fruit trees on all kinds. The leaves won't wither, the fruit won't fail. Every month they'll bear fresh fruit, because the river from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will be for food and their leaves for healing. Divide up this land," a message from God the Master. "These are the boundaries by which you are to divide up the inheritance of the land for the 12 tribes of Israel, with Joseph getting 2 parcels. It is to be divided up equally. I swore on a solemn oath to give it to your ancestors, swore that this land would be your inheritance. These are the boundaries of the land. Northern boundary runs from the great Mediterranean Sea along the Hethlon Road to where you turn off to the entrance of Hamath, Zedad, Beroth, and Sibrim, which lies between the territory of Damascus and the territory of Hamath, and on to Hazar Hatikam on the border of Haran. The boundary runs from the sea to Hazar Enan, with the territories of Damascus and Hamath to the north. That is the northern boundary. The eastern boundary runs between Damascus and Haran, down along the Jordan between Gilead and the land of Israel to the eastern sea, as far as Tamar. This is the eastern boundary. The southern boundary runs west from Tamar to the waters of Meribah Kadesh, along the brook of Egypt, and out to the great Mediterranean Sea. This is the southern boundary. The western boundary is formed by the great Mediterranean Sea, north to where the road turns east toward the entrance to Hamath. This is the western boundary. Divide up this land among the 12 tribes of Israel. Divide it up as your inheritance, and include it the resident aliens who have made themselves at home among you and now have children. Treat them as if they were born there just like yourselves. They also get an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. And whatever tribe the resident alien lives, there he gets his inheritance. Decree of God the Master. Ezekiel 48, sanctuary of God at the center. These are the tribes: Dan, one portion along the northern boundary, following the Hethlon road that turns off to the entrance of Hamath as far as Hazar Enan, so that territory of Damascus lies to the north alongside Hamath, the northern border stretching from east to west. Asher, one portion bordering Dan from east to west. Naphtali, one portion bordering Asher from east to west. Manasseh, one portion bordering Naphtali from east to west. Ephraim, one portion bordering Manasseh from east to west. Reuben, bordering one portion Ephraim from east to west. Judah, one portion bordering Reuben from east to west. Bordering Judah from the east to west is the consecrated area that you will set aside as holy, a square approximately 7 by 7 miles, with the sanctuary sit at the center. The consecrated area reserved for God is to be 7 miles long and a little less than 3 miles wide. This is how it will be parceled out. The priest will get the area measuring 7 miles on the north and south boundaries, with a width of a little more than 3 miles at the east of the west boundaries. The sanctuary of God will be at the center. This is for the consecrated priests, the Zadokites, who stayed true in their service to me and didn't get off track as the Levites did when Israel wandered off the main road. This is their special gift, a gift from the land itself, most holy ground, bordering the section of the Levites. The Levites get a section equal in size to that of the priests, roughly 7 by 3 miles. They are not permitted to sell or trade any of it. It's the choice part of the land, to say nothing of being holy to God. What's left of the sacred square, each side measures out at 7 miles by and a half. It is for ordinary use, the city, its buildings, with wide open country around it, but the city at the center. The north, south, east, and west sides of the city are each about a mile and a half in length. A strip of pasture 125 yards wide will border the city on all sides. The remainder of this portion, 3 miles of the countryside to the east and to the west of the sacred precinct, is for farming. It will supply food for the city. Workers from all the tribes of Israel will serve as field hands to farm the land. This dedicated area set apart for holy purposes will be square, 7 miles by 7 miles, a holy square which includes the part set aside for the city. The rest of this land, the country stretching east to the Jordan and west to the Mediterranean, from the 7-mile sides of the holy squares, belong to the prince. His land is sandwiched between the tribal portions north and south, and goes out both east and west from the sacred square, with its temple at the center. The land set aside for the Levites on one side and the city on the other, in the middle of the territory assigned to the prince. The sacred square is flanked east and west by the prince's land, and bordered on the north and south by the territories of Judah and Benjamin, respectively. And then the rest of the tribes: Benjamin, one portion stretching from the eastern to the western boundary; Simeon, one portion bordering Benjamin from east to west; Issachar, one portion bordering Simeon from east to west; Zebulun, one portion bordering Issachar from east to west; Gad, one portion bordering Zebulun from east to west. The southern boundary of Gad will run south from Tamar to the waters of Meribah Kadesh, along the brook of Egypt, and then out to the great Mediterranean Sea. This is the land that you are to divide up among the tribes of Israel as their inheritance. These are the portions, decree of God the Master. These are the gates of the city. On the north side, which is 2,250 yards long, the gates of the city are named after the tribes of Israel. 3 gates: the gate of Reuben, the gate of Judah, the gate of Levi. On the east side, measuring 2,250 yards, 3 gates: the gate of Joseph, the gate of Benjamin, and the gate of Dan. On the south side, measuring 2,250 yards, 3 gates: the gate of Simeon, the gate of Issachar, the gate of Zebulun. On the west side, measuring 2,250 yards, 3 gates: the gate of Gad, the gate of Asher, the gate of Naphtali. The 4 sides of the city measure to a total of nearly 6 miles. From now on, the name of the city will be Yahweh Shammah. God is there. This is the word of the Lord.